other folks come, we'll leave the doors open here and see how many join the school. Before we begin, I want to let you know that we have a sign-up sheet. This course, J.D. teaches. He'll tell you more about it, but you need to sign up for it. So if you're not signed in, make sure at the break you sign in the sheet. I didn't even know it, but some brother told me you're supposed to put your last name and then your first name. And, we don't read instructions, do we? We'll figure that out. But I'm going to leave this back there when we have our break. As much information, let's have a pray with me, please. If other folks come, we'll leave the doors open. Our God and Father in heaven, we thank you so much for allowing us to wake up this morning. See that the sun shines sign up sheet. We know that this part of the Fayetteville lesson. Everything will tell you more about it, but you need to sign up. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning and break, discuss the safety. I didn't know it. Some brother told me to put your last name, your and then your first name. You can have to think about this in our society. We don't read instructions, do we? We'll figure that out. But I'm going to leave this back there. To understand the thread of the virus and the election, let's have a problem. We pray that you other folks help us to use our God and Father in heaven. We thank you so much for allowing us to wake up late. The sun shines sign up sheet. Father, we thank you for J.D. You know that was part of this J.D. Everything will tell you more about it. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning and discuss the safety. Last name and then your first name. You can have to think about this. We don't read it. But I'm going to leave this back. To understand the thread of the virus and the election. We pray that you other folks help us to use our God and Father in heaven. We thank you so much for
there we go. All right, for y'all that don't know who I am, my name is J.D. Branch. I'm a member of the Forest Park congregation and have been all my life. I'll be 40 this year, so 40 years been at Forest Park. I became a Christian in 1991, so I've been a cartoon member since then. I started my law enforcement career in 1990. I worked loss prevention for Sears, Shane, Morris, down in Tennessee. I did that for about a year and a half, and then ended up going to Plain State University, worked as a dispatch for 3 years. All right, for y'all that don't know who I am, my name is J.D. Branch. I Park congregation. I graduated all my life. I did 2 years on the road with Plain State. I became a Christian with the city of Lake City since 2005. I'm currently I started my law agency as one of our shifts. I've got several certifications. I have an intermediate advanced certification. I have my supervision and management certification. FTO certified. General instructor of farm. Recently got the certification. So, I don't always know what I'm talking about, but I'm pretty confident. Since 2005, I'm currently if I don't know the answer to something, I will tell you I don't know. I'm not here to do anything like that. As far as tactical experience, I've been through, I have an intermediate advanced 1 and 2. I have through patrol rifles, so I've got quite a bit of training and experience with the police department. A couple of years ago, but I'm pretty confident, since 2005, alert came currently. It was started by Texas State University. I don't know the answer. They actually had it several years now, but ever since I called me like that, that's changed the way, as far as tactical experience, I mean, remember combat, I have now. So that kind of close to home. ever since then, so Texas State University has come up with a program for private training and experience, advanced law enforcement, rapid response. A couple of years ago, but I'm pretty confident 2008 alert. Currently, it was started by Texas State University. Several years now, but ever since our talking behind that changed as far as tactical experience. I mean, I have so that kind of stuff. Program for private training and experience, enforcement, rapid response. A couple of years ago, but I'm pretty confident 2008 alert. Currently, it was started by Texas State University. Several years now, but ever since our talking behind that changed as far as tactical experience. I mean, I have so that kind of stuff. We'll learn about the taking place. Program for private training and experience, enforcement, response. A couple of years ago, but I'm pretty confident 2008 alert. Currently, it was started by Texas State University. Several years now, but ever since our talking behind that changed as far as tactical experience. I mean, I have so that kind of stuff. We'll learn about taking place. Program for private training and experience, enforcement, response. A couple of years ago, but I'm pretty confident 2008 alert. Currently, it was started by Texas State University. But ever since our talking behind that changed as far as tactical experience. I mean, I have
somebody's in a group shooting. The federal government has said that more people actively engaging their attempts to kill people in a confined evacuated area. Just say something like that. Have you used that? One of those gangs acting and experience. Enforcement, response. A couple of years ago, it's useful to think of them as just attempted mass murders with the firearms, but you notice that there is really no requirement that a certain number of people be shot or killed when it comes to an active attack. Typically, the definition will include where there's 4 or more people killed. So when you think of 4 or more people, in the grand scheme, that's not a lot. One life is too much. But as far as federal definition goes, loss of 4 people is really not that significant. So some of the data that we're going to discuss comes from the FBI report from 2014 that's titled Active Shooter, a Study of Active Shooter Incidents. And it goes from the year 2000 to 2013. And eventually, we have to get our information from Alert. We have to get our PowerPoints from their website, and they have not updated it yet. I just downloaded the updated version last night. So again, they call it a active killer event in most cases because not all of the 4 or more events are actually done with a firearm. There, as we'll see here in just a little bit, sometimes a knife is used or vehicle or some other means is used. So when we look at the attacker, there's really no set profile for an attacker. There are times that they are typically younger, but they range from 18, 19 years old all the way up to 60s and 70s. Most of them are male, but there have been a few documented cases where they are female. And again, you have to keep in mind when we're saying active shooter, it's not always somebody shooting. It can be a knife, a vehicle, or some other means to harm someone. And there is no set race. If you remember 2 weeks ago, you may not have heard about it, but the Coors plant, there was an active shooter there. There were several people killed, and it was not the media's typical active shooter. It was not a older white male that was far right. It was actually a black male that did the killing, and you heard very little about it. So it goes back and forth. There is no set gender or race for that. There is a definite mindset to it. They're very deliberate in their actions. Most of the times that they will have manifests written out saying, this is what I'm going to do, this is where I'm going to do it, this is when I'm going to do it. But we don't know that until after the fact. They're very focused in what they're going to do. They have a plan. They're detached from society. They're typically loners. They're what you would consider an outcast. And many of them have been bullied. And they reach a point to where they're tired of it and they go to the extreme. And many of them, many of the active killer events, the perpetrator will end up killing himself before the police get there. So that's one of those things that it's not always 100% certain, but most of the time they will go ahead and kill themselves before we even get there. And they broadcast it. Some of them will actually get onto social media. They will start talking to their friends. They'll start sending letters. We were made aware of a threat about a month ago at the Forest Park High School. Some anonymous student posted on social media and I think Snapchat that today was going to be the day, or the following Monday, I think it was like the 16th or 17th, that was going to be the day that y'all going to learn. I'm going to come to the school. I'm going to take care of Forest Park. I'm going to do this, this, and this. About 2 weeks ago, Morrow High School received the same threat through Facebook and TikTok. They actually had a list of people going through showing who they were going to target specifically. Fortunately, it was not carried out. So that's a big deal. When they start doing that, we can typically jump on that real quick and stop it before it even starts. But that is a very big thing that is happening now, especially with social media. That it's a great thing at sometimes, but when it comes to threats, it spreads hate way too quick. It's very annoying. So I try to use that for a positive outlook. The next thing we're going to look at is some of the risk factors that are involved when it comes to determining somebody that may be an active killer. And most of the time, this type of information is going to be found out once the event has already occurred, people have already died, and usually the killer is already dead. But some of those risk factors are going to be a history of violence. They're going to have some exposure to a violence. Most of the times they'll have a substance abuse or a dependence on a substance. They will have mental illness, and they have a history of being suicidal. When you add all of these things together, that's when it kind of brings in together a perfect storm for someone to reach a point to to where they've decided they're going to go out and kill somebody. And again, the FBI they do extensive research into this every year, and they put out new numbers every year. This actually came from the FBI Prevention a Reality. It's an article identifying, assessing, and management of threat to terrorist attacks. The previous slide that we looked at discusses some of the commonalities in shooters, but we believe that awareness and prevention is key. So when we start noticing these things in somebody that we have come to a congregation, the West Gateway Church of Christ, those individuals in that congregation, those brothers and sisters, they started noticing something was different. And of course we find out he had a history of violence. He had a substance abuse problem. So the more that we can pick up, those key factors are what can successfully prevent someone coming in and making this a shooting event. Certain risk factors, they will exist in individuals that they may have that propensity for violence. These risk factors are a definite concern to law enforcement, and they should be a concern to you, especially if you are starting to see somebody that comes in on a regular basis that may be a visitor. And it's very hard because we don't want to shun that person. We don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. But bottom line is we have to protect the congregation. We have to protect ourselves. So if you're a friendly congregation, like I know you are, you're going to know that pretty quick. You're going to go up to these people. You're going to shake their hands. You're going to do that quick little, hey, brother, how you doing? Patting them down as you're hugging them, right? You're going to know these things. It sounds silly, but that's what it's come to. The people come out for a handshake. No, give me a hug, man. You start patting them down. But you start talking to them. You want to know who they are. And we can do that in a Christian way without making them feel shunned or that we're trying to pry into their lives. Because we do have a responsibility to protect our own. Then we can start that outreach program with them. Get that, if they're not a member, start that Bible study with them. Invite them to come back more often. Get to know them. That's one of the benefits of being a Church of Christ, is that we're very good at getting to know our visitors. Because we want their souls, right? So that's one way we get to them. So if you see somebody that you think may have these risk factors, you want to start looking at what's going on in their lives. Then, if you have to, you may have to seek help from behavioral experts. We happen to call psychologists in all the time. Hey, this gentleman here this is what we've got going on with him. Can you kind of help us figure out where he is emotionally? There's all types of different mental wellness facilities throughout the state of Georgia. Although we don't have a very solid mental health regime here in the state of Georgia, there are professionals out there that will do their best to help you when you bring those factors to them and bring that person to them. So some of the other risk factors that are involved is that they have a stalking or harassing or threatened behavior. Clayton County Sheriff's Office, they have a team of deputies called the Panthers. That's their main goal, is they track down people that are violating protective orders and aggravated stalking and just stalking. They have some of these people that have the propensity for the violence, have the ability to become that active attack. They also have family issues. They've either grown up in a broken home or they're going through something as an adult that has pushed them to that point. They start to live in isolation, and they have that or some type of instability in their lives. You'll start seeing people become more withdrawn. Somebody that has been a member here for years and years all of a sudden stops coming to church. You can't get a hold of them, or when you do, they sound irritable, or so there's something going on there that you may want to look at. And then other people come to you and saying, hey, I'm concerned about this person. That's some of the things that will help out. This next slide here, excuse me, is a map of the United States. If you look, the number of victims, less than 4, more than 4. Gun violence is going to be in yellow, knife violence is going to be in red, car violence is going to be in blue. And I believe this goes from 2000 to, I believe, 2005 or 2006. Look at the number of incidents that occur throughout the entire nation, just as the years go by. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. She's talking about these states here, right here, Montana, Idaho, North and South Dakota, Wyoming. These areas right here. If you've never been there, you can see for miles and not see your neighbor. Yes, it's not barren, but you got some distance out there. Plus, the temperature's very cold. Yeah. If I had the money, that's where I would be. I would be in Montana. 500 acres with a house right smack dab in the middle of it with a moat around it. And you better call, text, or email me, tell me you're coming. But I probably won't have cell phone service or email, so I guess I'm saying don't come. That's right. I'm okay with that. I've been in Georgia long enough. I'm tired of the hot humidity. But as you can see, from 2000 to 2017, there have been 280 documented cases of an active killer event. And a majority of them, yes, have been with firearms. But you also see that there's been several knife attacks and several vehicle attacks. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, I would much rather be shot than stabbed or run over. I have a couple of friends that have been stabbed, and they say that is the absolute worst pain because you don't know you've been stabbed until all the adrenaline's done and over with, then it really hurts. So I would prefer not to have any of it happen, but if I had to, yes, sir. No, that happened in the bank shooting, I believe happened in 97 or 98. And these numbers didn't start coming out into the year 2000. So no, it does not include those. Even then, nobody died in that situation. The only people that died were the 2 gunmen. All the officers and civilians that were struck survived. Yeah. You're an NRA member, aren't you? Yeah. You're using common sense. You can't do that. He's absolutely right. Some of these states that have some of the most restrictive gun laws do have more of the violence. And typically it is because they are in such close proximity to each other. They're so populated. You probably don't notice, but during the summertime, between May and June, and then late August, September, where it's starting to get warm, starting to get cold, that's when we have a lot more of our crimes, because bad guys like to be comfortable too. They want to do it when it's not so hot, not so cold. They will do most of it at night, but oddly enough, they don't like the rain and they don't like fog. I never understood that, because that's when I would do it, but that's just me. So now we're going to look at some of the locations of the attacks. If you had to guess, where do you think most of an active shooter or active killing event takes place? What location? Schools. Anybody else? Where? Home. Oh, start it over again. The number one answer is usually schools. That most of the attacks take place at a school. But again, ever since Columbine in 1999, schools have become a lot more strict on who they allow onto the property. They also do a soft lockdown almost every day, meaning that you have to buzz in to go to the office, sign in, and then be able to go see your child or whatever it is you're doing there that day. They lock the doors once school has started. 54% from 2000 to 2015, 54% of the attacks occurred at a commercial location. So when you combine businesses and other commerce locations, that's where most of those come into place, and that's the majority of the attacks, followed by the school systems, outdoors, and then other locations being home or something like that. So, sometimes you're not the safest at work, even though you think you may be. A lot of times there is a direct relationship between the shooter or the killer and the place of the attack. As you can see, 55% of them have a connection to that location, whether they're either a employee or a former employee, student, former student, something of that nature. There is some reason that they are going back to that location and performing the killing. There is a direct connection to them. So a little bit more than half have been concentrated to that area. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. George Santayana, I think that's how you say his name. I'm not 100% on that. So the next few slides, what we're going to look at and what we're going to talk about is some of the locations of active killer events. And I'll refer to it as active killer again just because not all of these have been done with a firearm. A couple of them were done with a knife and a truck. So the first one we're going to look at is USC Santa Barbara, California. This was I believe it was a student. And this is just one of those examples of pure evil at its best. This particular person killed 3 people independently by stabbing them at his home. And then he eventually proceeded to attacking people with a gun on campus at University of California, Santa Barbara, and driving a car over a couple of others. So this is one of the reasons why we have changed it from that active shooter to active killer, because he used a knife, then he used a gun, then he used a car. So he went for the trifecta and used all three. These people have a determination. If they want to kill you, they are going to kill you. This is why it's so important that we be vigilant and understand what's going on around us, and that we take in those subtle clues that, what we call your spidey sense, when the hairs on the back of your neck start standing up, that's when you need to start paying attention. So again, this was a multi-pronged, multi-weapon attack, and this is actually starting to become a trend among those that are doing these active killers. This is probably one that everybody remembers. Back in 2016, Orlando, Florida, the Pulse nightclub. This is a gentleman that had Islamic ties. He went into a nightclub and killed 49 people within a span of, I believe, 8 to 10 minutes. So he had a connection with this nightclub because he was a frequent patron. He was there all the time. I don't remember the details of why he did it because, in my opinion, they're not important. It happened, and this is why we're here. 49 people lost their lives because somebody got upset. And they went in and they actively were killing people. 2017, Las Vegas, Nevada. This one I know quite a bit about. Last year I had the opportunity to go to the Georgia Associations of Chief of Police Summer Conference in Savannah. They had one of the Las Vegas deputies come out and actually explain this event to us. This gentleman, he was set up for bear, and he had the high ground. It could have been a lot worse than what it was. Very, very bad. He actually, he brought some of the crime scene photos in. He was actually trying to shoot the fuel tanks at the airport across the strip. He had watched too much TV, thinking that you could hit it with a tracer round and ignite the fuel, blow up the airport, is what he was trying to do. He was trying to wreak mass havoc. He was shooting down into the crowd, pushing them towards that direction, and firing at those tanks, trying to kill more people. The reason it took so long for law enforcement to get to the location, there were multiple calls of multiple gunmen. One sector of the Las Vegas Sheriff's Office was half a mile down the strip working on a bomb call. So there were officers there. They had off-duty officers there. It was just so much chaos because of so many people, and so many outside calls came in that area that they had to divide and conquer. So that's why it took them a little bit longer to get where they needed to be. He was actually confronted by one of the hotel security people that came in with 2 officers that were working part-time at the concert. He killed 59 people during this event, which made it the highest mass casualty incident since 9/11. Yes, sir. He had several different weapons. They actually showed one of the crime scene photos from inside the room, and he had several rifles there. One of them was equipped with a bump stock, and basically a bump stock it's a device that's put onto a weapon that you have to hold it a particular way, and the recoil is what helps make it fire that rapid pace. But if you don't know what you're doing with it, it's going to be broken, and it's not going to be as Yeah, it's not, if you don't, like I say, if you don't know how to use it, the cadence is going to be off, so you're not going to be able to fire as fast, but he fired pretty fast. Yes, sir. Oh, it will do the same thing as a fully automatic rifle. Now, what you're talking about, get with me afterwards, because I have a lot of theories about that. And but the trooper that, or the deputy that was there, he said it was a bump stock. It was not a fully automatic weapon. He did not have any fully automatic weapons there at the time, and he eventually killed himself. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah. There were a lot of questions at the time, and if I can remember the website, I will send it to you. But if you want to read into it fully, Las Vegas Sheriff's Department did release their full investigation on their website, and I think it's 30 to 60 pages worth of reading, very very detailed in what they talk about. It was very good. So in situations like this is an open area that's very crowded. He had the high ground. He had multiple rounds. He had multiple weapons. In this case here, there were multiple officers on the ground working part-time, and because of the mass confusion, they had a hard time reaching him because everybody was running and panicking. This is where we stress the avoid, deny, defend concept. If you can avoid it at all possible, avoid them. In this case here, a lot of people, and we'll get into another one here in just a little bit, but coming into this building today, how many of y'all use the same entrance and exit that you always use for this building? You know what happens when you become under stress? You do the exact same thing. So if you use this door here, that's the door you use, that's the only door you're thinking about. But what if the shooter or the killer is in that direction? Do you know where to go? Can you program your brain to change and go to a different direction? When you walk into a restaurant, how many times are you looking for a different exit? This sounds like paranoia, but my saying, and I tell my guys all the time, a healthy dose of paranoia is okay. Now, if you're one of those ones that, you're always looking, the skittish type, I'll say you're paranoid. But when you go into a structure, you need to know where your exits are, because front doors here, if somebody comes in this front door, are there exits behind us? How many of you know that, though? How many of your members know that if somebody comes in that door and you see the guys with the guns going that way, to go that way? How many of you know if you had to go out this door? You have to think about those situations. You have an exit here. You have two here. You have another one in this hallway. You have two here. I've been here several times, but today's the first day I've actually kind of walked around a little bit, 30 minutes. I know a few exits. You might call me paranoid. I call it prepared. Okay? How many of you know the difference between cover and concealment? If I asked you what concealment was, what would you say? Ghillie suit. That's right, so they can't see you. You're hidden. Concealment is just that. It's something that hides you. Cover is something that will slow down a bullet or deflect it or give you some sort of protection from that bullet. Not everything that you hide behind is going to be cover. These pews here, yeah, they're pretty solid wood, but all they're going to do is hide you. They come in with the right rounds, the right weapon that you can shoot through these pews. So you'll need to know the difference between cover and concealment. And that was the problem here in Las Vegas. They were in an open air environment. There was no cover, only concealment. Okay? So that's one of those things that you have to look at. You have to be able to know how to avoid your attacker. If you have to deny them entry, deny them entry, and at the last moment, the last choice is fight. That's where they had the problem in Las Vegas. New York, 2017. The gentleman had some Islamic ties as well. He killed 8 people and wounded 15 using a U-Haul truck. Ran them over. Sutherland, Texas, 2017. This is one that we heard quite a bit about as well. One gunman killed 26 people, wounded 20 others. This individual, he was dishonorably discharged from the Air Force. The shooting actually started on the outside of the building and made it in, and started coming into the building. One of the survivors, a witness, retrieved their own weapon, I believe from his car, and started shooting at the suspect. Ended up causing him to flee. And I believe one of the neighbors across the street took him down with a AR-15. So it doesn't have to happen inside, as we can see. It can be outside. It can be with a car. It can be with a weapon. It's very hard. So when it comes to the number of deaths, the number of deaths are the product of 2 things: target availability and how long it takes the police to get there. I would add a third, and that being the armed citizen. If you do not have a carry concealed permit, I highly urge you to get one, and I highly urge you to get some type of training with that weapon. At Forest Park, I'm the deacon over security, and that's one of the things that we're working towards, is getting somewhere to go where we can be able to move and shoot freely and use a course of fire for us to qualify with. That way it's on record that he's qualified or she's qualified with this particular weapon. This is the course of fire they shot. This is the rounds they shot. So the number of deaths are determined typically by target availability and how fast the police get there. And I would say a third is that armed citizen. As we saw at the West Freeway Church of Christ out in Texas, 15-yard headshot. Ended it. 3 seconds. The whole attack took 6. 6 seconds, he killed 2 people. 3 seconds, he was dead. Armed citizen. So we as police, we train to get there quickly. But let's just use Fayetteville for example. If y'all were to call the police here at the building, who comes? Is it the sheriff's office, county PD, or city PD? City PD comes in. They're not that far from here, right? How long do you think it would take them to get here, though? Yes. Yes. This area here is very difficult because you do have that weird intersection up there. It's been like that for the last, as far as I've been driving. So that's one of those things you got to look at. How long is it going to take police to get here? The typical response for a police department in anywhere is on average 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a very long time. A very long time. In our training, we are put into a red man suit, or we go to defensive tactics training, and we're supposed to attack a guy in a red man suit. It's a big padded suit, and we're supposed to fight him for a minute. That's our test. We have to fight for a minute, as the longest minute of your life. And you're in the best shape because you've just been through the academy, you've been all through the PT, the running, push-ups, all that good stuff. Well, how about that? that's a long minute. And then when you're trying to do weapons retention, that's a long minute. 3 minutes when something bad is happening is a very long time. For my department, our general response is 2 minutes. But that's just because we're only 1.8 square miles big. So we can get just about anywhere, lights and sirens, 2 to 3 minutes. But again, this is a great average and statistical number, but in reality, you have to look at outlying factors. Had the race been going on this weekend, how long would it have taken police to show up if something happened tomorrow? I know the gas station, but you still got all the people here for race weekend. You still have all the traffic details. A major event. It could take up to 5-6 minutes for somebody to get here. You're on your own, and that's a scary thought. It also depends on how quick they can get into the building. It depends on how quick they can determine where the shooter's coming from. If they don't have any information from anybody inside the building, they've got to go to where the gunshots are, and we're going to be moving to the gunshots, but it's going to be not a run, but a jog, because we have to clear, for the most part, clear the structure we're going through. We're not just going to pass by an open door and just not look. We're going to stop, look, and then we're going to keep going. We're not going to go in, but it's going to take us a minute to get to you. And that's a scary feeling. But if you give people the false sense of that 3-minute response times, they'll only prepare for 3 minutes and no longer. And we need to be prepared for a lot longer than that. All right? It is about 10 till. Let's go ahead and take about a 10-minute break. Stretch your legs, use the bathroom. There's refreshments out there, coffee. If you haven't signed up on the sign-up sheet, please do. We do have to turn these numbers into alert to show that it's being taught. So be back at 10 o'clock. I got a few minutes past the hour here. I'm going to try not to keep you no longer than 12 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and get started back up if you want to come back in, and we'll get started. So if you remember that before the break, we talked about the response time for police. The average response time is going to be 3 minutes. And that's on a very good day, no traffic, anything like that. So just keep that in mind. When we come to a call, we're gonna be getting there as fast as we can, but we don't have a warp speed Dr. Zulu and let's go. You know, Scotty, ramp it up. I'm giving it all she's got. We don't have any of that. Right now, I'm in a Ford Explorer police package, and it's probably the slowest vehicle on God's green earth that I've ever driven. I wish they would bring back a Crown Vic. I wish I wasn't so fat that I could still fit in my Charger, but that's where we are. So the next thing we're going to look at disaster responses. And before we get into how we're to respond to that active shooter event, that active killer event, we're going to kind of look at the big picture of how people actually respond to a stressful situation in general. Okay? And there are 3 stages of disaster response. This research was done by a young lady named Amanda Ripley, and she wrote a book in 2008. It's called The Unthinkable: Who Survives When Disaster Strikes and Why. It may have been an article. I can't remember which one it was. But it was through Three Rivers Press. So if you want to look that up, it's probably a good read. I've not read that one. I've read several others. If you can find a copy of it, Terra at Beslan is a very good book. It can be dry at parts, but it's actually a gentleman that's a retired Special Forces operator that goes back to Beslan, Chechnya, and covers the school shooting that happened there that lasted 4 days. It was a very, very nasty scene. But again, that's because they didn't have the response that needed to be done. So there's actually 3 types of responses that you're going to look at when examining who survives a situation and who dies during a high-stress disaster situation. And she identified 3 phases of a process that every one of us goes through. Some of us go through it a little slower. Some of us go through it a little faster. But we all go through this process. And the ones of us that can make that decision and go through those decision process making skills faster are usually the ones that will survive. So the first one we have is denial. You deny the situation is even happening. Then from denial, you move on to deliberation. Okay, I can't deny the situation is happening anymore. Now I got to figure out what I'm going to do. Am I going to run? Am I going to fight? Am I going to hide? Whatever it is you're going to decide to do, you have to go through that process and think about it. What am I going to do? And then you have that decisive moment. You've come up with a plan. Now this is what you're going to do. Then you have to execute that plan. So if you can go through those stages fast and make those decisions, your chances of surviving are a lot higher than somebody that stays in that denial phase forever. I don't know if you can read that or not. Yeah, okay. Denial is the first stage. No, it isn't. You always hear that. Denial is the first stage of everything. You're an alcoholic. No, I'm not. You're a drug addict. No, I'm not. You're a Netflix junkie. No, I'm not. There's always that denial. And many people, they will not admit that there is a disaster going on, or they'll underestimate the severity of that disaster while it's taking place. So that causes them to take a delay in the action that they need to be taking, and that will cost them their lives. If you think about the World Trade Center, either time. In 1989, I'm sorry, there's 3 times. There was it was early 80s, then 91, 87, 91, and then 2001. There's 3 separate incidences there. People were calling others to check with them to see if there was actually a critical incident going on. People were taking time to log off of their computers, and they were taking time to pack up their stuff before they evacuated. I'm sorry, but if I hear a big boom, I ain't, deuces, I'm out. I'm going to take care of me. I'm going to get everybody else out. I'm not going to sit there and deny it. That's what happened. People denied what was going on. They just thought it was some kind of training exercise. So why did they do that? Why did they wait? And it's very simple. The brain is lazy. It does not want to do what it doesn't have to do. It wants things to fit into a pre-existing little box. This is the plan. It wants to stay within that plan. And if it's outside of that plan, you go into vapor lock. And you can't figure out what you need to do. So the brain tries to define a disaster as something that's already familiar with. For example, during active shooter or active killer attacks, many people will say, "Oh, I just thought it was fireworks." It was actually gunshots, but oh man, I just thought it was fireworks. I didn't think nothing. I just kept on doing what I was doing. And that's because the brain, it is more apt to process that information of someone shooting fireworks than it is actually somebody coming in, shooting an actual human being and killing them. It's easier for the brain to process that. All right. I'm going to see if this works. What we'll see here is this is called social proofing. It's also linked to what they call diffusion of responsibility. And it's all psychological stuff. Basically what we're going to see here is that our actions and reactions are determined by other people's actions and reactions. So it's a very interesting video. And let's see here. There we go.
If you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly, you might think that surrounded by all these people, someone would intervene. After all, isn't there safety in numbers? Psychologists say no. Research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When people are in a crowd, it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. Liverpool Street Station in London, a busy thoroughfare for commuters. Unknown to these passers-by, Peter is an actor. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill.
Help.
How long before he gets help?
Please, somebody. Help. Help me, please help me.
Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
Please, somebody help me.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is 2 conflicting rules. One is the rule that we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have effectively a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help. And it's very difficult to rebel.
Ruth, another actor, takes Peter's place. How long before she receives help? Four minutes later, and 34 people have passed without stopping.
Well, people don't really want to know. They just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
Unwittingly, these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't get involved. They're afraid to stand out from the crowd and won't take action if no one else does. This woman has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing. Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps.
You alright? You alright?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, you look a bit clicky, you know what I mean?
She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
Do you want to sit up? You alright, yeah? What's wrong?
First I thought she was dead. Then I sort of checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
This time, Peter's dressed as a respectable gentleman. Now that his dress is in keeping with those around him, how long before he's rescued?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm alright.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir, and suddenly everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
Why you're lying on the floor in the rain?
Because he's part of the right group, everyone wants to help.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill and nobody helping and walking past, so I'd just like to check that he was okay.
And I thought, well, it's wet, so he must really be ill because he's going to ruin his suit anyway.
Interesting, right? How our reactions are when we're in a social setting. As a Christian, we should be in the forefront. We should be those persons helping others, correct? So, but that goes against every social norm that's out there. You see somebody laying on the side of the road, it's like you got blinders on. I got things to do. I got somewhere to be. That's what happens. That's part of the denial process in a disaster event. Then you started seeing people go and stop and look at him and should I not? If I do this, and I have to maybe be exposed to this. You start seeing them go through that deliberation phase, right? So it doesn't matter the situation. It can be a novel or ambiguous situation, and we're going to look to somebody else to see how we're supposed to act. If somebody else is doing nothing, then we're going to do nothing. If others are acting or helping out, we tend to help out because we want to do the normal thing to do. We want to see what everybody else does first. So again, when they started acting and started helping those people in the video, they had gone through that denial stage. They were starting that deliberation phase, and then when they saw somebody else act, that's when they started to realize that there was a problem, and they went to act as well. Yes, ma'am. Goodness of their heart. I mean, it all depends. A lot of people you will hear, well, if I was in that position, I would want somebody to help me. One of my officers is a very big-hearted person, and it causes him to help people sometimes that he probably shouldn't because it gets him in trouble. But it's not because he's doing the wrong thing. It's just he goes about it in the wrong way, kind of deals. But it's because, in his reasoning, when he does things like that, is I was in that position at one point in my life, and I made a promise to myself that if I saw somebody in that position, I would help them out. I would do what somebody else didn't do for me, and that's usually the cause for it. Is just because they were in that position and they know what it feels like. Yes, ma'am. We're a very distrusting society. Well, to go along with what she said, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I will for just a second. difference between now and, say, 50 years ago, 60 years ago? The media. If you think about it, if you look back even during the turmoil of the civil rights movement, Vietnam, especially starting in Vietnam, I'll say Vietnam era. World War II was probably some of the worst fighting America has ever seen, especially over in the Pacific. The Japanese were relentless. They had an honor system. They did not want to die without honor. Okay? Gruesome fighting, World War II. Korea, harsh conditions to fight in. Then you come to the civil rights movement in Vietnam. Before those two incidents occurred, yes, you had some battlefield reporting from overseas, but starting Vietnam, that's when they started sending actual combat reporters in with video cameras, following our soldiers around. Stuff that happened in Vietnam was happening in World War II, World War I, Korea, all that. But the public was ignorant to it. Ignorance is bliss when it comes to certain things. I have certain opinions about how things should be done, especially in a time of war, but those are my personal opinions, and I will not, if you want to know them, I'll tell you, but I'm not going to vocally, do it publicly. But we started listening to the media a lot more over the last 30, 40 years than we ever did before, because there was no nightly news. It was newspaper. You heard about it in the newspaper. In the newspaper, it doesn't seem as bad. But now in the media, with the advent of television and 24-hour news channels, there's pictures to go with those words. And they can pick and choose the worst of humanity, put it on the TV screen. And we feel that that's what's happening everywhere, and that's how it is every single time. And it's not. There are still good people out in this world that will give you the shirt off of their backs, but you got to step away from that TV to learn that. And that's part of the problem. We have become such a society that has zero trust in each other, and that's a sad thing, because in the end, we're going to need each other at some point in time, and we need to be able to trust each other. All right? So now we've come to the deliberation. The next step that Ripley identified was that once people get past that denial stage, they come into deliberation. They understand that something bad has happened, and now they got to decide what they got to do. Okay? And the problem is because their brain is not functioning well, because of the effects that stress can have on a human body, it takes a little bit longer. So when fear enters into the equation, because they know it's a potential life or death situation, they tend to take longer to decide. My opinion, my theory is that the quicker you can decide whether you go straight, left, or right, make that decision, stick to it, keep going. If you have to change on the fly, you change on the fly. You have to be adaptive to your situation. You've got to be fluid with the situation that you're given. And that's part of the things that we do as officers. We have to be fluid with that situation. We can have a situation where I'm talking to Brother Dave right here, and it's all hunky-dory. We're talking about licking the schnozberries, and they taste like schnozberries. Next thing I know, he's kicking me in the face and drawing a gun. It happens that quick. You have to be fluid with that situation. You have to have a mental mindset, what I call a combat mindset, to know that I'm sitting here listening to this guy talk about this active killer stuff. Somebody comes in the door, this is what I'm doing. We do it all the time. You're driving to your favorite shopping spot. All right, I'm gonna take 85 to Jonesboro Road. Then I'm gonna go, oh no, wait, can't do that. I'm gonna go 75. No, can't go 75. That place is crowded. Man, how am I going to get there? You're doing that every day as you're driving. This car turns in front of me. What am I going to do? you're preparing yourself, and that's what deliberation is. You prepared yourself to make that decision so you can make it that much quicker. But the thing that slows us down in deliberation is that we have what's called the human brain. And the human brain, it's reflective. It's a thinking brain. It's flexible. It's rational. You have to sit there and think about it. And that's what we typically operate on. Then you have what's called the lizard brain. The lizard brain is reflexive. It's the reactive brain. It's fixed. You've prepared this scenario in your head, and this is what you're going to do. It's fixed. And then it is emotional. It's fast. It just kind of happens. It's more of your natural instincts of what happens. When somebody slams a door, you automatically look, see what's going on. Or somebody waves at you on the street, you automatically wave. If somebody yells out War Eagle, you yell War Eagle back. But that's part of the deliberation. You have those two types of brains, and you've got to be able to combine the best of both worlds. So again, your human brain, when it comes down to it, is your fight, flight, and freeze response. Those are the three major responses that we have in just about any situation. We're either going to fight, we're either going to run, or we're going to freeze up. What we call vapor lock. You're just not going to know what to do. You're going to stand there and just freeze up. And that's a bad place to be, especially in a very high-stress situation when it's life and death. That is a very bad spot to be in. All right, stress responses. How many of you have heard of Colonel Jeff Cooper? Retired UMC, United States Marine. He came up with a color-coded system for, he calls it combat awareness, but it has been, over the years, it has been developed into situational awareness, combat mindset, how people respond in the stages of life that you're in. So when you come to stress response, your first condition is what we call condition white. Condition white is when you're just absolutely relaxed or asleep. So this is when you're at home and nothing bad is supposed to happen to you at home, right? Because you're on home base. Condition white, your heart rate is about 60 beats per minute on average, okay? Then you have condition yellow. Condition yellow is that your heart rate's a little bit elevated. It's about 90 beats per minute, but you're not stressed out. You're in a cognitive state of, I'm paying attention to what's going on. I'm looking for maybe something out of place. You know, it's where you should be in everyday life, where you should operate, being able to see your surroundings, know what's going on. You know, notice that person that may be standing over there with a book bag, and then all of a sudden they get up and they walk away, but they leave the book bag. Last night we went to, because Henry County has closed their schools, we have to give our kids somewhere to go. So we're taking them down to my parents down in South Georgia today. We went and bought some play clothes. We went to the Goodwill last night. And I'm sitting there waiting for my wife and daughter to try on their clothes, and my son's over here, you know, looking at books or whatever. Female comes over to the changing area, looking at a couple pairs of shoes, and she's very hurried. Nothing to really alarm you about, but to me there was something off. When she runs up, she automatically picks up a pair of shoes and just walks away. Well, that's kind of odd. She didn't even look at what size they were. You know, no offense, ladies, but I know y'all look at the size of shoes before you even pick them up and try to put them on, because they got to be comfortable, right? Well, next thing I know, she's on the other side of the store, and she kind of just walks out. Well, I noticed that the shoes that she had on when she was next to the changing room were a pair of black Crocs. Straight black. She's going out the door, and I noticed there's a white stripe around the bottom of her foot. She had taken a pair of Vans, went over to the women's section, put the Crocs on the shelf, and put the Vans on that the store was selling, and walked out of the store. That's condition yellow. You see something, kind of piques your interest a little bit, and you're just watching. You're not really concerned, but you know something's not right. Then you have, there's another one in between here that normally comes about with Colonel Cooper's color code of awareness, and that's condition orange. Condition orange is that you have seen something that brings it to your attention that there is a possible threat, and you're following that person or that object until you're able to discern that there's nothing there, or there is a threat and you have to take action. Then you have condition red. Condition red is that you have identified that threat, you know that's a threat, and now you're taking action to get to that threat. And that's usually about 120 beats per minute. Silver or gray there is this is when you start going through the cognitive processes and it starts to deteriorate. Your mind is starting to slow down. You can't make those decisions fast enough, and you're getting tunnel vision. You're getting auditory exclusion. If you've ever talked to somebody that's been involved in a shooting or been involved in combat, they don't remember the sounds because they're focused on what's in front of them. I've had one of my officers has been in several shootings from a different agency up north, and he says, I don't remember the gunshots. So I remember the flash in front of my face because that's where my gun was, but I don't remember the gunshots. He excluded all the noise. It's just part of your body shutting down and going through that process. Then you have condition black. This is where you are in complete vapor lock. You freeze. You can't do anything. Your heart rate's 175 beats a minute plus. You are going catatonic at this point. You can't make a decision. You can't talk. You shut down. This is the area that we want to stay out of. We don't want to become someone that goes into condition black. Someone that is in condition black is very possible that they may void their bowels or they may urinate on themselves because you have gotten to that point where you are just literally scared to death. It's a very dangerous spot to be in. So we want to make sure that we stay out of condition black. We want to do our mental preparedness and be able to operate, be able to take care of those around us. Because if you've reached condition black, you're no good to anybody else in this congregation. Even at condition gray, you're not any good to anybody else. We need to operate in that condition orange, condition red, where we can make those cognitive decisions and make those actions count. Okay? This video here is, I want you to take a look at some of it. Gentleman comes in with a gun and starts to try to take over the store. And this is kind of a good indication of the conditions of awareness. All right, so did you notice the young lady there with the baby in the stroller? Okay, did you see how long it took her to get that baby out of the stroller? That is a normal function in life, right? You're going through your day, you got to go back out to the car, you unbuckle the baby, you're able to pull the straps off, pick them up, put them back in the car. If you notice, it took her almost 10 seconds to remove that child from that car seat or from that stroller. This is something that she does every day, 200-300 times a day, and it took her that long to get that baby out because she was under such high stress. She's unable to perform that menial task in a timely manner. In a critical incident, you think 10 seconds could be a long time? I know when we get tased, you think 5 seconds. 5 seconds ain't that long. Boy, that's the longest 5 seconds of your life. It is a giant Charlie horse from head to toe. 5 seconds, but that's a long 5 seconds. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 3 minutes. Those are long times to function before you can get help. Especially when you have someone that is a focused and aggressive attacker. It doesn't matter what type of weapon system they're using. If they're using a pocket knife, somebody that's focused and is going to get you, that's a long time. Panicked people are bouncing off of each other. You can see in the store, they're just bouncing back and forth off of you. They're not looking where they're going. They've gotten into that tunnel vision. They've gone to that condition gray and are struggling to get through. How many of you remember the Station nightclub in Connecticut? I can't remember exactly what year it was. Fire at the nightclub. This was later in the 90s, early 2000s. But if you look here, this is an exit, this is an exit, this is an exit, and this is an exit. It is. So if you don't remember it, what it was is that there was a band playing at a very small nightclub. During one of their songs, they had pyrotechnics go off and set some of the curtains on fire. They were at the stage here. I believe this is the main entrance to the nightclub. So everybody was here, people behind the bar. There's an exit here behind the stage, the main bar exit, and the kitchen exit. Remember we talked about earlier, knowing your exit. If something happens, most of the people were going to go out the same exit that they came in through. Okay? So just keep notice of that. Keep that in your mind as we go to this next slide. Before I play this next slide, there is audio to this. There's no words in it that are offensive that I can remember. But what you're about to hear, what you're about to see is going to be a little bit traumatic if you're not used to it. And I hate to say that, use that word used to it, because that's what happens sometimes. We get accustomed to things. So if you have to step outside, by all means step outside, and we'll call you back in once the video's over. But we want you to watch this video because it vividly illustrates the problems of human performance and decision making under extreme stress. It also shows social proofing in action as well. The initial denial, especially even when it's obvious that the flames have gotten out of control and that they have reached the roof, and then it sparks some of that stress response for people who only know that one way out. Fire started now, the fire technique is gone. That's where it stops. So you see 1 minute from the time that the pyrotechnics went off and started catching things on fire, for them to deny the process, deny that it was actually happening, then accept that there was a fire going on, that there was actually a situation there. So then they started thinking about where they needed to go and what they needed to do. Then they started leaving. Okay? Here we see a map the same layout. Again, you've got this is the main entrance here on each side, the stage exits on the back, and the 2 exits by the bar and the kitchen. The yellow circles here, those represent bodies that were found in that location. And the total number of bodies in white for that area. The number of dead in the exit hallway, which is that main entrance, is 31 people. 31 people tried to force their way through a 6 to 8 foot wide door in mass hysteria because the place was on fire. You notice there's no bodies here at this exit. One in the kitchen, one at the dance floor, nobody here in the backstage. Had they not denied the process and not denied that there was an actual event going on, there was about 10 to 15 seconds that they could have actually made it out this stage door from this area. 3, they could have made it out this door, but this is because they only knew that one exit. That's how they came in. That's how they were going to leave. Because of that, 31 people died. Because there was no initial panic, they were still able to use their human brain at the start of the fire and process a proper response. Once the primary entrance became clogged, it was inaccessible. Panic set in, and the people reverted to their lizard brain. The only thing they were thinking about was getting out of that nightclub. When they were able to think rationally, they knew that there would be more than one exit, besides the one that they used to enter the building. But because that lizard brain took over, stress took over, they could only think of that one door and couldn't think to go to another exit. They had different options, but when we see when the human brain shuts down and the lizard brain takes over, the options, if you're not properly prepared ahead of time, you have no options. Okay, so we want to make sure that we stay prepared. This is the photo of the front entrance where they came in, or where they were trying to get out. That was a big deal when that happened. I remember when that happened, and could have been prevented. Could have been prevented. So during the deliberation process, you want to make sure that you can keep your human brain, the one that's a thinking brain, the one that's a reflective brain, that you want to keep it going and running as long as possible. So there are several techniques that you can help to do this. First of all, you can tell yourself, calm down. Just talk to yourself. You may look crazy doing it, but you know what? You're going to survive. Hey man, look, just calm down. We're going to get through this. Breathe slowly. Do what they call combat breathing. The slide here says 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out. Normally it's when we teach people, breathe in for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 4. That's going to help you slow your heart rate down. It's going to get oxygen to your brain, because if your brain doesn't have that oxygen, you can't operate, and you start losing that human brain function. You want to shift your emotions. You're going to be scared, but you want to take that scared emotion and change it to something more useful. This says to change it to anger or aggression. Sometimes you have to be aggressive in a situation. If you're not prepared to be aggressive, if you don't take that reactionary gap away from somebody, you might have a problem. You don't want to sit there and be able to get the advantage on someone and then back off. You want to, what we tell our guys, press the fight. Press the fight to wherever it is you got to go. And once you get there, you keep pressing until it's done. Then you can relax. But until it's done, press it. I haven't followed this one very closely. It says stay fit. I'm in shape because round's a shape, right? But research has shown that those who are more fit, both mentally and physically, they're able to deal with stress a lot more easily. Not saying that if you're out of shape that you can't deal with it, because I'm a prime candidate. I'm out of shape. But I train my mind every day when I go to work. All right, I got my stuff, got my gun, got my vest, got my radio, I'm good to go. I'm going to get home no matter what it takes. If I got to fight dirty, I'm going to fight dirty. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to fight dirty. It don't matter if it's a fair fight or not. There is no such thing. I'm going to fight dirty. Because I'm coming home. I'm going to come back to church that next Sunday or that next Wednesday or whenever we have services. I'm coming. I'm going to fight. But the research shows that the more you are able to cope with that stress, the better off you will be. And that's usually through mental fitness and physical fitness. So deliberation, you want to keep that human brain operating as much as possible. And you want to tell yourself to calm down, to make sure that you're getting there. But eventually, no matter how hard you try to calm yourself down, no matter how much breathing you're doing, eventually that human brain is going to shut down. And then you're going to go back to your lizard brain. Everything needs to fit in that little box, right? This is where the what-if scenarios that you should be running in your head every day come into play. You have scripted, which means that you think through these different if-thens or what-if scenarios in your head, and then so you're better prepared for it, and then practice it. You actually go out and practice it. Growing up as kids, how many of us went through fire drills? What about tornado drills? How many of us have done that here at church? I can't remember the last time we done one at Forest Park. That's one of the things that we're doing and getting prepared for is a fire drill, tornado drill. Anybody old enough to remember the shelter in place for a nuclear fallout during schools? Crawl up under a desk, that kind of thing. You practice it. Mentally, you were prepared. All right, we get the word, this is what we're supposed to do. Now we're going to put that into practice. All right, we got the word, I'm going to crawl up under my desk. We got the word, I'm going to go out in the hallway. I'm going to sit on, with my face to the wall, cover my head, cover my neck. Fires in the building, we're going to go this way, and we're going to meet at this particular point. Same principle here. If someone comes in this building through the front door, I'm going to do this. If somebody comes through that front door, I'm sitting here. I'm going to turn around. Everybody down, and I'm going to engage. That's the things that I think about when I'm at the church building. If I'm sitting with my family, how am I going to react? If I'm sitting in the back doing my security duty for that week, what am I going to do? Where you keep your gun while you're at services. All right, I carry concealed. This is where it's at. This is where my extra magazine is. Do you have a tourniquet? Do you have basic first aid that you're going to need? Where is that? How am I going to get to that? Who am I taking first? Who am I protecting first? Do we have somebody that can get the older people out that need to get away the quickest? Then you go through and you start practicing those things. And it needs to be the same every time. You need to, if you carry conceal, make sure you carry the weapon in the same spot. If you carry it in the bag, make sure the bag's on the same side. You know where it's at. If you carry it on your person, I have several different ones that I carry. I have 3 different weapons that I carry off duty. One of them I carry inside the waistband holster, sits in the same spot every time. The spare magazine that I carry with it, depending on what type of pants I'm wearing, depends on where that magazine goes and where I get to it. The other 2 I wear in the outside the waistband holster. It's in the same spot every time. Magazine is in the same spot every time. Has to be repetitious and routine to understand where you're going to go, because once your brain shuts down, you're going to go back to your training. You hear it all the time on the news. I just reverted back to my training. That's what's going to happen. You're going to react without even realizing that you have done that particular thing, and it's going to be because you trained on it. And that's the thing that we need to stress to our members is when we do these things, we're doing it for a reason, because we want you to be prepared for what's about to happen. How many of you know the name Rick Rescorla? Remember we talked about New York and the World Trade Centers a little bit earlier? This gentleman was dedicated to protecting his co-workers. He was at the World Trade Center each time it was attacked, and each time it was attacked, he did what he was supposed to do, and that was get his people out of the building. The last time he was seen was in 2001, going back into one of the towers to get more people out. He actually has a monument dedicated to him. 1993, he was a vice president of the corporate security for Dean Witter Morgan Stanley. When the World Trade Center was bombed, he led the evacuation that day and stayed in the building for 12 hours helping firefighters rescue trapped survivors. Then you fast forward to 9/11, he again was evacuating the World Trade Center, and he was last seen going up the stairs into the burning building, conducting a final sweep. He was killed when the tower actually collapsed on him. This is what you have to be willing to do if you're going to fight. You have to understand that your actions may cost you your life, and you've got to be okay with that. Anytime you decide to act, doesn't matter how small the incident may be, there's always a risk. You have to weigh that risk. Is it worth it to you? Are you okay with putting your life on the line for that particular reason? This gentleman was, and he saved numerous lives. All right, it's about 10 till to the hour again. Let's go ahead and take another break, stretch, get you some more coffee, and sugar yourselves up, and we'll get back at the top of the hour. right, it's the top of the hour. We're going to get back to it. This is our last, I didn't even change the clock on my computer either. This is our last hour, so I'll try to get done as quick as possible and leave the last few minutes for questions and answers and discussion. We left off with Mr. Rescorla, who dedicated his life to saving his co-workers. He was able to get past the denial stage, go straight into deliberation and into action. So we want to make sure that that's something that we do. The next slide that we're going to look at is going to cover the train shooting that took place over in France. You had 3 military personnel on leave. Terrorists decided to take over the train with the AK-47s, and they fought. They took them out. They saved not only their own lives, but they saved the lives of hundreds of people on that train. They were able to move through that denial and go straight to deliberation and action in a matter of seconds to make sure that they stayed alive and that other people stayed alive. And Miss Ripley, who come up with these stages, again, she states that those that are able to do those things and go through those stages the quickest are the most likely to survive. So this is just a quick clip of their events.
3 childhood friends were on a train bound for Paris when they heard a gunshot. Amid screams and commotion of the passengers, they quickly focused on a man wielding an AK-47. Almost instantly, one of them said, "Let's go," and the 3 ran toward the shooter. Those 3 friends are with us here today. Thank you, Alec, Spencer, and Anthony, for what you did on that train and for joining us here. And that's because after Alec said, "Let's go," he and Spencer and Anthony sprinted toward the gunman while he trained his rifle on them. Spencer tackled the assailant, and the 3 worked to disarm him. As we know, Spencer was stabbed in that effort. After they knocked out the gunman, they tended to other injured on board before paramedics and police arrived.
So they were able to almost immediately take action. And that's because as military members, that's something they train for, okay? But that doesn't make them extraordinary. What makes them extraordinary is that mental preparedness, that they did it no matter the consequence to them. They knew they needed to save lives. Let's get up and roll. That's where we need to be. We need to reach that level of mindset that we can prepare ourselves to do what's needed to be done. Whether it's escort people out of the building or escort them away from that disaster as quickly as possible. Even if that's all we do, that could be enough. We can help somebody in that way. It doesn't mean that you have to be the one that engages somebody with a knife or driving a car. But getting people out of harm's way is something that we can prepare ourselves for. But if you choose to be that person that runs into gunfire, you need to be prepared for that as well. So now we're going to move into the civilian response. And we're going to look specifically at how we would like for civilians to respond. And remember that we're going to reference you back to those 3 phases of denial, deliberation, and action. If I can get the sound up for this next slide, please, sir. So when it comes to denial, you don't want to deny it. If you hear gunshots, it's probably gunshots. You want to go straight to that deliberation phase. All right, so you're in an area where you're at church. How many times have you heard firecrackers go off in the church building? Absolutely none, right? It's not fireworks, it's gunshots. Get to doing work, okay? If you're at a location where that noise is not supposed to be going on, then you need to skip that denial process and say, we've got something going on, we need to handle the business at hand, okay? So you can skip that denial phase, you can go straight to deliberation and go to work, right? Recognize that those of us who don't hear those things or don't think like that, we're going to have to catch other people up to speed real quick. So sometimes those sounds can be muffled, but we need to recognize that fairly quickly that something bad is going on and we need to get to handling business. This video here, several years ago, there was a mass attack, a mass killing event at Virginia Tech. And a lot of people you will hear say, well, you know, something like that happens, I'm just going to lay there and play dead. Think about that for a minute. Is that really going to be your best option? I mean, think about it. It's playing dead. I know for myself, if I were to ever be that person to snap and go off the deep end and start shooting people, playing dead is not going to be a safe bet, okay? So you got to keep that in mind.
We heard the first shots at around 9:40 a.m. I was sitting on the wall of the classroom, so in the hallway, and I could hear the shots getting closer and closer very quickly. I mean, there was only a few seconds between the first time we heard them and when he actually walked in. To me, it sounded like an axe being taken to a piece of wood. And our teacher, she opened the door, and she peered outside, and she immediately shut the door, and she said, call 911. And right then, he walked in just seconds after. There's absolutely no time to think or to duck or to take cover, and people just kind of fell to the floor. And he immediately walked in shooting, and he went to the other side of the classroom, and he started going down the rows. He went down each row very quickly, very purposefully. And I remember thinking, your turn is coming. You're going to get shot. I mean, I didn't realize there was an active shooter, but I knew something bad was happening. He came back to our classroom 3 times, and on the 3rd time, he killed himself in the front of the class. In between each time he was there, you could just hear people crying and coughing, and the cell phone started ringing. When he was in our class, I remember trying not to breathe very much, so he couldn't tell I was alive. Because as my stomach was hitting the chair, I was thinking, you know, he can see me breathing, he can see me alive, and that was very scary. I'll never forget when the SWAT team first broke in at around 9:51. The officer in the front of the classroom said, we have a lot of blacks in here. And at the time, I couldn't comprehend what he was talking about, but he meant triage codes. And I remember looking into the girl to my right and realizing, you know, what black meant. He looked over me and he said, first he said yellow, and then he changed it immediately and he said red. And that's when I first started panicking. I still couldn't speak. I was shot 3 times, lying on my back, and I remember thinking, what do you see? Like, what can you see on me that I can't, that you would change me from yellow to red? He killed 12 people in my classroom, including our teacher.
So that was Kristen Anderson. She was in room 211 of Virginia Tech in one of the classroom halls there, and we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. She was shot a total of 3 times. Once when the shooter came in initially, and then twice because she was playing dead when he came back in. She was shot 2 more times. Code black is those that are deceased. Code red or code yellow is that she's uninjured, or she may be a low priority injury. Code red is she's a high priority injury and needs to be taken care of immediately. So playing dead is not the strategy that you want to tend with, and you want to go to that deliberate action and get yourself out of there. Hide in hope. That's a lot of people's motto, is that they're going to hide and they're going to hope nothing happens. Hiding is problematic, though. There's actually 2 main issues with hiding. The first is that whatever you are hiding behind is probably not going to be bulletproof. It's not going to be that true cover. It's going to be just concealment. There's just not much here in a building that's going to stop a bullet. Most of these walls, maybe the exterior walls have some cinder block, but most of the interior walls are going to be just sheetrock. And there's nothing to stop a bullet going through sheetrock. So you got to keep that in mind. So if you can be seen, you're going to be shot more than likely. The second problem is that if you are seen, what are you going to do? Because if you're hiding, you're probably hiding in a spot that there's no way out of. You're trapped. So you've just given that assailant an easy target for them to engage. Hiding and hoping, they're not very effective survival strategies, especially in an event where there's a firearm involved. So we want to go to our deliberation. We want to avoid, run. If you can avoid the attacker, avoid them, run away as far as possible. The proximity to a target versus skill, the further away you are, the more skill they're going to need to hit you with a weapon, especially a firearm. But up close and personal, I don't need any skill. I can just point and shoot. So the farther away you can get, the better off you are. Then you want to deny them. If you are in a room, if you decided to hide in one of these classrooms, you want to deny them entry. So you want to barricade that door so they can't get in. Can they still shoot through the walls? Yes, probably so. But if they can't see you, they're firing blindly. If they can't get into that room, that's your main purpose. You get everybody down on the ground. You can protect yourselves that way. The last is defend or fight. You want this to be your last option if you're unarmed. If you're armed, that's a different story. But avoiding, denying, and defending. You want to keep that defending as a last option. You may be put in a position where you have to defend. You have to fight. And I'm one of our tactical patrol officers. I have a little bit more training when it comes to, I'm not SWAT certified, but close to. And we have a saying, if you're going to fight, you need to fight like you're the third monkey going on the Noah's Ark and it's about to rain. So you need to fight as hard as you can to make sure you get your spot on the ark, right? Fight as hard as you can to get away, to do what is necessary to make sure you survive. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There is not. Some of them will go armed to the teeth. I mean, they'll have hundreds and hundreds of rounds. I think the bank shooting you were talking about in California in the 90s, they had over 1,200 rounds loaded up into 100-round magazine drums. The Vegas shooter, I think they said he had about 1,500 rounds loaded into different magazines. But some of these other ones, they just go in. The West Freeway shooting, he had a shotgun, so he couldn't have had no more than 5 rounds. 6 if you took the choke out or took the plug out. So it all depends on what type of weapon they're using and how prepared they are to what they're going to do. The next video we're going to watch is from 2010, a Panama City School Board meeting. Watch the reactions of the people that are seated in the audience when the suspect first pulls out his gun. They're clearly in denial and they will fail to take immediate action. They don't get up, they don't do anything, they don't try to avoid him, they just sit there stunned. And then some of them, they'll pick up their handbags, they'll pick up their stuff and try to leave. Then you'll see someone attempt to disarm the attacker. It's not enough to have a great idea, but you got to be able to do something about it. The will to do something is very commendable, but without that sufficient practice, that sufficient training or preparation to take that action, more than likely you're going to get yourself hurt. So again, you want to defend, but if you don't have that training, if you're not prepared to do that, you're going to end up getting hurt. There is a difference between the right to defend yourself and someone else and having the ability to. We all have the right to do it, but some of us have a little bit better ability to do it than others. And the ones that have that ability are the ones that should be taking action. The school board president, you can see that he'll do a good job of trying to get the gunman to talk, buying time for another official to, a police or a deputy to show up to take care of the situation. But he starts letting his ego take over. He starts arguing with a mentally ill person that is having a mental break.
From the technology, you'll notice it's on the chart that you have there, and it's part of the plan that we have, that the workshop we're going to have following this meeting, but this will be the first step in that whole process. I have a motion. A motion. Everybody in this room. Counter. Hit the road.
Kind of in shock, getting low to the ground. This one lady here, she's picking up her bag, getting stuff.
Hey, sir. John, just let him talk. He's talking. John, go ahead. Ginger.
She has the right, but she did not have the ability. All right, there's usually a problem with this video. It stalls at some point. It goes on. They eventually get him taken care of and removed. It looked like a purse, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Done something to help out? Yeah. All right. So eventually, the gentleman does fire his weapon. He actually aims it at the head of the school board, pulls the trigger, and gunshot goes off. The school board president acts as if he's actually been shot, but he had not been. So that kind of shows you the power of the mind, that even though he had not been shot, the body's going to react as he had been hit. And like I say, there's usually a problem with this video, and I haven't figured out quite how to fix it. But he fires several times, and even once he's on the ground, he's still able to fire in any direction. Yes, ma'am. In 2010, this actually occurred on December 14th, 2010 in Panama City. He was a disgruntled individual who fired more than a dozen shots at 6 of the school board directors. He missed all of them. He was then shot several times by a security guard and a former policeman. And then he goes down. We teach shoot to stop the threat, or shoot to kill, shoot to stop the threat. He had been shot several times. He was on the ground, but he was still able to fire his weapon if he so chose to. But he ended up taking his own life. He stood up during the school board meeting. He was 56 years old. He was an ex-convict on probation for aggravated stalking charges. And he was trying to make a motion and sprayed, instead of making an actual verbal motion, he pulled out a can of spray paint and painted a V in a circle, inside of a circle, for V for vendetta. He was mentally unstable. He pulls out his handgun and starts making threats to them. Supposed to have a bipolar disorder and interest in anarchy. According to some of the reports, and he was reportedly unhappy with the school board for terminating his wife's teaching job. So he had a direct connection to the school board, and he also felt that the sales taxes were unfair because it hurt the lower income families. So that was his reasoning for being there. All right. Again, along with the void run, you want to leave as soon as possible. You want to know your exits, and you want to call 911, right? So we'll see a video here. This is where an attack begins. You see a gentleman walking towards the door, pulls out an AK-47 or 74, some type of small rifle, and goes inside the store and starts causing havoc. This was in January of 2015. He had pledged allegiance to an Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. So he attacked some people in the Hyper Kosher Food Supermart in Port de Venice in Paris. He kills 4 people, of whom were Jews, and took several hostages. He was also later to be confirmed as the shooter in Montreux the previous day, and he ended up being killed by the municipal police there shortly thereafter. All right, so he comes inside the store, chases the young lady into, this young lady makes it into a back room here. We want to consider our secondary and tertiary exits. So your third exit, you can see here, she's got probably several of them. She's got a ladder. I believe there's a door here, and I think this is a door that may have been blocked. Yeah, there's one door there, the ladder. So then we want to go to deny or hide. When you're in a room, to deny them entry, you want to lock the door. You want to turn the lights out, and you want to stay out of sight. Most of the schools nowadays have that big picture window or a small slatted window in the doors. Keep away from those. If they can't see you, out of sight, out of mind, right? So you want to make sure that you stay away from that. You want to turn the lights out. If you have something to barricade the door with, which if you look at this lady here, I think the entrance to where she is right in here. She could have moved all that stuff to block the way. She could have denied him entry. Sometimes that just locking the door is the simplest thing you can do, but that could be the most effective. Sometimes they're going to go the path of least resistance. So make sure that if you are in a room that has a lock that door, and then start putting stuff in front of it. If it's locked by a key, make sure you know where the key is kept. If it's a hallway lock, make sure that you know that. Because if it locks from the outside and not the inside, you may not want to go into that room. You want to know your rooms, especially here at the congregation. You want to make sure you know all your classrooms. We are looking at just making some door stops from just pieces of wood to put them on the inside of the room. So even if the door doesn't lock, we can put that in there, and we can deny entry because the door's not going to open with that door jamb there. So we want a barricade, heavier the better. If they can't move it, that's good. The more the better. And if you got a doorstop, that's probably going to be your best bet. They make them in several different types: wood, rubber. You can see here that she had stuff to put in place that would have barricaded her in there, but because she was under that stress, when she chose to hide, she didn't think about that. So active participation in saving your own life is an ongoing process, and you need to constantly be aware of what can be done next in these types of situations. Hiding and covering your face like an ostrich, sticking your head in the sand, isn't going to help you any. All right, you're safe for the moment, but what is the next step? Make sure you've got something else. There's always something else to be done. You just need to make sure that you're getting it done. Closing the doors, locking the doors, that'll keep them out for a little bit, but sometimes they can still get in. You need to be able to make sure you can get out. All right, and these are just the door stops. It's simple little things like that can be the matter of life and death. The door, does it open inward or does it open outward? If it opens inward, door stop is going to be a good deal. But what if it opens outward? Like these doors here, they open outward. How are you going to keep those closed? How are you going to be able to deny somebody coming in? Are you going to get some type of pull rope, link your belts together, and get somebody to hold on to the door? Are you going to tie them together somehow with a belt, rope, whatever it is you may have? Something to help keep that door closed. A tension sleeve. There's this particular gym here that's, I think you can actually get these, you can get these on Amazon, but it's called a night lock lockdown. You can get it from nightlock.com. It's just a piece that bolts on to the bottom of the door, and you slide that little red piece over the door jamb and into the slot there, and you can't open the door. I think they're about $20, maybe $30, something like that. They're very inexpensive. You can deny people entry for very cheap.
All day we have met people who remind us what teachers do, how much they care even in the face of terror. And I sat down with a first grade teacher at that school, Caitlin Roick. She heard gunfire, large windows exposed her classroom, so she managed to rush 15 small children into a tiny bathroom to try to save their lives.
I put one of my students on top of the toilet dispenser. I just knew we had to get in there. And I was just telling them it's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. I pulled a bookshelf before I closed the door in front of it. So it was we were completely barricaded in. I turned the lights off.
Did you tell them to be quiet? Did you
yes.
worry about one of them?
No, I told them to be quiet. I told them we had to be absolutely quiet. Because I was just so afraid that if he did come in and then he would hear us and then he would maybe just start shooting the door. So I said, no, we just have to be absolutely quiet. And I said, there are bad guys out there now. We need to wait for the good guys. They're coming again. I wanted us to be okay. And I'm so saddened that there are people who in this situation are not okay. And my heart goes out to anyone who knew them and was a part of their lives. I just can't imagine.
Did they cry?
No, if they started crying, I would take their face and say, it's gonna be okay, show me your smile. I really tried to and one of my students was, would say things like, I know karate, so it's okay, I'll lead the way out.
They really said to you, we want to go home for Christmas.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or I just want to hug my mom, or just, things like that were just heartbreaking, and in my mind, because you're hearing, I've never been a part of something, obviously, anywhere near this traumatic. And so I'm hearing the gunfire in the hallway, and I'm thinking in my mind, I'm the first classroom. Why isn't he coming? I'm thinking we're next. And, and in my mind, I'm thinking, as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, what are your thoughts? What are your, and I'm thinking that I have to almost be their parent. I have to tell them, So I said to them, I need you to know that I love you all very much and that it's going to be okay, because I thought that was the last thing they were ever going to hear. I thought we were all going to die. And I don't know if that's okay, teachers and, but I wanted them to know someone loved them, and I wanted that to be one of the last things they heard. Not the gunfire in the hallway. It's just so horrible. So horrible. horrible.
How did you know you were going to be okay? What happened?
I didn't. What finally happened was the gunfire stopped. The gunfire wasn't that long, so that stopped. But I said, no, we're not going anywhere. We're staying here until someone good comes in. Gets us out. So eventually, what happened was the police came and started knocking, and obviously, I mean, I was completely beside myself, and I said, I don't believe you. You need to put your badges under the door. So they put their badges under the door. I said, if you're really a police officer, then you would have a way to get in here. You would have a key, or you would have gotten it from the janitor. If everything's okay now, you would have found the keys. So he had the keys, and he found the right one, and he unlocked the door, and then they brought us out to the firehouse to meet up with the rest of the teachers and students, waiting for parents to come and pick them up.
I think there are a lot of people who wish.
All right. So that was Caitlin Roig. She was one of the school teachers at Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook was a tragic event because children reportedly lost their lives. Unfortunately, I believe there was something more to it. I don't know about y'all. Y'all watched the video. I didn't see any tears. Nowadays, with everybody being of the ability to sue, none of the gun manufacturers were sued. You saw none of the children's funerals or anything like that. But what she did to save her children was that she denied that shooter access to her classroom. She had them away from the door. She had the lights out. Nobody could see inside. They couldn't see the kids. And she saved those kids that were in her classroom. And that's what she was describing. I mean, these kids are 6, 7, 8 years old. They're scared to death. She was able to remain calm to tell them, I love you, everything's going to be okay. Even though she didn't know that, she was doing her best to reassure them, to keep them calm, to keep them quiet, so he would not come back to that classroom. Okay? So she was able to deny him access to that classroom, even though she was one of the first ones there, one of the first classrooms there. So when it comes to denying and hiding, when you're dealing with that situation, if you don't have a combat mindset, then it's one of those things you don't really aren't able to grasp the severity of the situation, especially when you're dealing with someone that is determined to get there and kill you. So if you're going to deny and hide, you want to make sure that you position yourself in an area where they cannot see you through a window or a door. You want to stay below that window level. You want to lock the door, barricade the door. You want to move to the deepest corner of that room. If they are able to get in, and you do have to fight with that person, and they do have some type of weapon, whether it be a gun or a knife, you want to position yourselves as close to that door as you can. And you want to post up against that doorpost, because when they come in, most of these people do not have formal military or tactics training that military and police get. So the gun or the knife is going to be coming in that doorway first. Okay? So as soon as they come in that doorway, you want to grab that gun itself. Take control of it. You want to be mindful of what's behind you and to the side, especially if there are other people in that classroom. But you want to take control of it. You want to have somebody with you. Again, you want to fight like you're that third monkey trying to get on Noah's Ark. You want to do as much damage as you can to get that weapon away from them. And you want to shift them into a less dominant position. You want to make sure that you have that dominant position. There's a robbery. A guy standing there with his phone trying to, I'm going to grab the bottle of wine. He comes in, I'm going to knock him upside the head, right? Then he goes after him. Probably not the best decision to smack somebody over the head with a bottle of wine, but he grabbed what he could to fight. So he later on determines that avoidance is better. He eventually runs down an aisle and escapes out the back of the store. If you see the lady in the blue shirt, she just drops down. Yeah, she's playing dead. So using that tactic, as we heard earlier from Mrs. Anderson, we know that that does not really work as well as you would think it would. This is Lieutenant Brian Murphy. This is about this photo. This quote is about a mindset that you have to have during a disaster situation. I teach my guys that during officer survival, during any type of tactics training, just because you've been shot does not mean you are dead. You can survive a gunshot wound. You can fight through it. You just have to have that mental preparedness to know we are in this situation. This is a disaster that we're going through. I've got to fight. You have to be mentally prepared for that. So Lieutenant Brian Murphy says, I'm not going out in a parking lot. I'm not going out like this. I'm not going to let my wife down. I'm not going to let my daughter down, and I'm not letting my stepkids down. He was talking to himself. He knew what he had to live for. And that's the way we have to be, especially if we're confronted in a life or death situation. And I know this sounds scary, and it sounds like I'm teaching paranoia, but this is something that needs to be done, especially in the world that we live in. 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, how many of you thought we would have to have an active killer training session at a church? Well, you don't count. You with the rest of us. But for those of us that are just living our lives and have not seen the bad side of people at their worst, 10 years ago, we would have never thought this was going to happen. I would have never thought, growing up at Forest Park, being a member at that congregation, and being an officer in that city, that I was going to have to start carrying my gun every single service, carrying extra magazines. I didn't think I was going to have to go talk to the elders and say, hey, look, we need some Stop the Bleed kits and tourniquets. I didn't think I was going to have to go to them and say, hey, look, I need a couple more people and figure out if they're armed or not so we can set up security. I never thought that was going to happen. I figured it would just be me because, I mean, that's part of my job. As a police officer, they say we're never off duty. If I don't carry a gun, very rare. Church, not at church. The only reason I don't carry one around the house is because I got small kids. I keep them locked up. But everywhere I go, I have a gun. 10 years ago, I never thought it would be to that point that we are now, where we're having to talk about soft lockdowns and hard lockdowns and avoiding, denying, and fighting somebody in a church building. That's the world we live in. So I'm not telling you to be paranoid. I'm just telling you to be cautious. Be ready. Keep that mindset to know that if something happens, no matter what, I'm going to fight through it and I'm going to survive. And I'm going to help somebody else survive because that's what we need to do. So when you want to do this, you want to check your environments and you want to look around to your surroundings when you're doing these avoid, deny, defend, or run, hide, fight. Where are you going to go to avoid that situation? How are you going to deny them access to you? And if need be, what room are you going to use to defend yourselves and deny them access? If they get access, what are you going to use to defend yourselves? Those are the things that you need to think about during this process. And remember that what you do matters. When you tell us where you are and what you've got going on, the more information that we have on the way to the call, the better off we're going to be. Because if we're going to an active shooter event, if we're going to an active killer, we're coming out hot and heavy and ready to go. If we know where you are, if we know who's armed, who's not, if we can find out where the suspect is quick enough, it's going to be over a lot faster. So what you do does matter, okay? This is a flow chart and how we view these actions in general. The boxes are actions, and when you see the diamonds, there are decision points. Again, it's important to remember that the proximity to a threat may limit somebody's options in what they do. If you can't avoid or deny them access, then you're going to have to start defending yourselves. So you have an attack starts, you have your primary exits. If you have one and you can get to it, can you avoid it? Yes. But what happens if you can't get to that primary exit? You deny them entry into wherever it is that you are. Are there other exits that you can get to? If you block this one exit off, can we get out that exit with no problem? If we can't get out that one, can we get out this one? Are you able to deny one exit and be able to get out the other? If yes, then you go and avoid. If no, then you're going to have to defend. Then it all starts back over again. All right, so here is Virginia Tech. What we're going to look at is Norris Hall and a case study of the different response options that took place with the students during this particular incident at Virginia Tech. This is Norris Hall. It looks like a fortress, right? This is the hallway on the second floor of Norris Hall, and this is where the shooter actually went room to room. There's entrances. It's almost like a stadium seating in the classrooms. You have an entrance upstairs, and it funnels down kind of like this area here, all the way down to the first floor. But the shooter was on the second floor going back and forth. So these are the rooms that were affected. Rooms 206, 204, 05, 07, and 11. If you remember Mrs. Anderson, she was in this room right here, room 211. The suspect in this case, he'd actually shot 2 students earlier in the morning, which led to a very large police presence in that area to respond to Norris Hall. He entered into room 206 first, and then he goes into room 207 and then 211. Every person in room 211, every single person that was in that classroom, every student was shot at least once. He killed 11 in that classroom and wounded 6. And that was actually the 3rd room that he attacked, and he revisited that room 2 more times. Room 204 was Professor Levu Lubrick's classroom. And then Professor Labruski, he held the door closed while 10 of his students were able to escape. Professor Labruski and another student were killed, and 4 were wounded. But because he was able to deny that shooter access into his room for just a few minutes, it saved a few of the lives in that room. Room 205 was actually a complete denial room. No, he was not able to get into that room. The students were actually laying on the floor and putting their feet against the door to hold it closed. He did not shoot. He did shoot through the door, but no one was injured in that shooting as he shot through the door. So if you look here, room 206, the red are the ones that were injured. Were killed. Yellow were injured or wounded, and green are the ones that survived. That's room 207, room 211, 204. He got 10 students out. Another 4 were injured, and 2 were killed. And that was the student and the professor there at the door. And he was denied entry into room 205. So this is the casualties at Virginia Tech. Room 206, that's where the shooting actually started. He walked in, started killing people. He left and came back and started killing more. The teacher heard gunshots, told the students to call 911. They attempted to block the door with the desk, but they pushed his way in, shot the professor, and walked down the aisles, shooting students as he walked down the aisle. And then he returned later on to shoot more. In room 207, he walked in and shot several students and then shot the teacher, walked down the aisles again and started shooting, then he left. He attempted to return, but by that time they were able to barricade the door, and he got the door open just a little bit, I think about an inch or so, stuck the weapon inside, fired several shots at the doorknob and stuff, and one of the students was hit then. in Professor Labruski's room. He was a Holocaust survivor. So you knew he already knew how to fight because he survived that situation. He held the door shut while he tried to enter, yelled the students to jump out the window, and then he was eventually killed through the door. When the room 205, they heard the gunshots, they actually barricaded the door and he was not able to get in. When the police arrive, if you have that event and somebody comes in, once the police get here, remember, follow the commands. It's going to be a lot going on, but I promise you, we're going to be extremely loud. Some of them may be extremely rude, but we're under stress at that point too. We don't know who's who, especially if we're going into an unknown situation. So follow their commands. Walk with your palms up, and don't move unless they tell you to move. Our main focus when it comes to that is that we're going to seek out the shooter first. Especially if they're actively still killing, we're going to be stepping over wounded and dead and going to that threat because we want to stop that threat. We want to stop somebody else from being killed. So don't be offended by that. That's what we need to do. Because if we stop and help you and we get shot, we're no good to you or the other people. So we're going to stop the killing first. That's the first thing we're going to do. Then after we handle that situation and get that secured, then we're going to come back and we're going to tend to the wounded. And then we're going to finally start getting people out of the building and evacuate as fast as possible. This next video shows of a school when the police arrive and what you're supposed to do. He's escorting people out of the building.
If you're not cool, I'm not walking a bit. Sir? Go. Watch that deputy right there. Keep your hands where I can see him. All the way to that deputy. You're going to make a left when the deputy's out.
He's telling them to remain calm. He's actually leading them out of the building. Keep your hands up so we can see them.
Try to relax, everyone. Try to relax.
If somebody comes around this corner,
I'll take a bullet before you do. That's for damn sure. Just be cool, okay?
Okay, so you see him walking down the hall following his directions. Emergency medical, they're not going to come in until the police declare the scene safe because they don't have ballistic vests, they don't have guns. They need us to do that for them. So they will not enter that scene until it's secure. So it may take you a minute to get some type of medical treatment. This can take 20, 30 minutes after the fact. It can take several hours. Meanwhile, we have people that are bleeding to death because of wounds or whatnot. So we need to make sure that we have some type of training in place where we get training on tourniquets, hemostatic gauzes or combat gauze. If you have medical personnel that go to this congregation, get with them. Let them teach you how to pack a wound to keep it from bleeding out. It's not rocket science. You get the combat gauze, you rip it open, you throw it out, and you start plugging it in the hole. We got to be able to stop the bleed. People are going to need help, and that's why we need to seek that initial additional training. You can go to www.dhs.gov/stopthebleed, and you'll be able to find this little card here. Shows you where you need to put tourniquets. If it's, most of the time, you want to make sure that tourniquet's high on the extremity. So if you're in the arm or the legs, you want to get it as high as possible and as tight as possible. If you can get your finger underneath it, it's not tight enough. It's going to hurt. I'm not going to lie to you. It hurts when you're putting that thing on. We've done it several times in training, but the quicker you can get it on, you can leave it on there. There have been documented cases of them being on for extended periods of time, 12 hours plus, and people still remaining to keep the use of that limb. It's going to go numb because it's going to cut the circulation off because it's going to stop the bleeding. If you have to, you can use 2 tourniquets. But this is just a way to show you how to stop the bleed. You're going to apply that pressure, apply the dressing and press, or you're going to apply a tourniquet. After the event, what's going to happen? You're going to be messed up. Plain and simple. You're going to have some personal issues. If you don't, you need to be worried because there's something else going on. You're going to need to expect that mental trauma. Post-traumatic stress disorder is going to come on. You're going to be scared of every little thing for a while, and you're going to have to kind of find a way to deal with that. You're going to need to develop that critical incident plan where you can send people to doctors or psychologists or something, have support groups with the congregation if it ever happens here. You're going to need those types of things. You're going to experience shock. You're going to experience survivor's guilt. So we need to make sure that we have a plan in place in case something like that happens, so that we can send someone to at least one private counseling session to make sure that they're okay, and if they're not okay, that they can continue to get help. You will notice that during this presentation, at no point did I mention any of these killers' names. As long as I am breathing, you will never hear me name their names. I respect the victims so much more than I respect those people that did the killing. They don't deserve to be recognized. That's why, one of the reasons why they did it. They wanted to be recognized. They wanted that 15 minutes of fame. I refuse to give that to them. So when the media and social media and all that puts that out there, it makes me so angry, because these people don't deserve to be recognized. They are what they are. They're killers. Yes, we are to forgive them, but I'm still not going to name their names. I'm not going to recognize them in any kind of way. We know that some of them are motivated by desire for fame and notoriety, but there's nothing in their lives worth committing mass murder in a way to do that. So why should we give them that recognition? Why don't we take away that motivation for them? If you've noticed in the media, they plaster them all over the TV. I don't agree with that. They do not deserve to be named. They deserve to be anonymous in death, just the way they were in life. It's the victims that we need to remember. That's who's important. How many of you know this young lady? Have you ever seen her before? This is Victoria Soto. She was the first grade teacher at Sandy Hook. And she is what we would consider a hero. Gentleman came into the school, started shooting as many kids as possible. She put herself between her classroom, her kids, and that shooter. She did not survive, but her kids did. She gave up her life to protect those children. So why is it that we know more about the shooter than we know about her? I've stopped looking at stuff like that. I can't even remember his name. Don't care to remember his name. But at the time that this incident occurred, we knew more about him than we did about her. So why should we care? We need to remember the victims more than anything. This is Angela McQueen. She was one of the physical ed teachers. Math teachers and physical ed in Illinois, Mattoon, Illinois. When she was faced with a student shooter, she actually ran after him, took him down, and held him till police arrived. That's what we need to be. We need to be the ones that are there to protect each other. We need to be the ones that are there to protect those that are closest to us. These are the active shooter events. This is some of the information we went over, some of the studies. You can find more information about them online. You can actually go to the alert websites, alert.org, and they have, you can look at the data that they've actually compiled through the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and a couple others to actually give you the numbers on it. We've covered the active shooter events. We've covered disaster response. We've covered avoid, deny, and defend. And we've covered the Virginia Tech case study. it is our responsibility to make sure that we are protecting our own. When something happens, are we prepared? Are you comfortable enough with what's going on in the world? Are you comfortable enough with your training, with your mental mindset to do what's necessary to protect your fellow brothers and sisters? Because at this point in time in the world that we're living in, it's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when and how bad is it going to be. My job as a member of the church is to make sure that I can prepare you as best as possible. This is just a small snippet of what can be done as a protection for a congregation. There are so many other things that we can do to make sure that we stay safe. Again, we're starting from scratch at Forest Park on our security program. We've never had one. Like I said, I've attended there for the last 40 years, and I can only remember maybe once or twice doing a fire drill or a tornado drill. Do you remember ever doing maybe one or two? Yep. Yeah. Hey, y'all watch out and make sure nobody leaving the doors open all the time. We used to unlock every door in that building. Not anymore. Not anymore. Not while I'm there. So we are starting new. We're starting fresh. If you have not had any type of firearms training, let me know. I'll be more than happy to help you out. Gentleman here, he's got the archery's patch on. It's a great place to go and shoot. They're usually fairly reasonable in their lane prices. Our biggest thing right now is that we don't have anywhere open to shoot. Some of the stuff that needs to be done cannot be done in a indoor range unless you rent the entire range out, and that can get expensive. The one that I would use is Armchar over in McDonough. $500 to rent it out for